This is Between the Brackets, a MediaWiki podcast, episode 13, July 24th, 2018. Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm Yaron Koren. My guest for this episode is Remco de Boer. Remco is a partner at ArchiXL, that's spelled ArchiXL, which is a MediaWiki-based enterprise architecture consulting company in the Netherlands. Now, there are a fair number of MediaWiki-based consulting companies, but I think ArchiXL stands out just for the scope of its operations. I actually wasn't sure whom to interview from there because I've met at least 5 of the people from their various SMWCon events. That's the Semantic MediaWiki conference. But they're clearly making heavy use of MediaWiki, and they've been around since 2008, which is also impressive. I decided to ask Remco because he's, in some sense, what I consider a spokesperson for the use of MediaWiki within ArchiXL. He's also the CTO of ArchiXL's subsidiary, which is called XL&Knowledge, which is a play on words. It's spelled XL&Knowledge, and we'll get to that later on as well. So Remco, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
First of all, at a high level, what does ArchiXL do?
So ArchiXL is, in essence, an architecture consultancy, and I'm talking about information and enterprise architecture. So what we do is we do a lot of consultancy engagements with mainly organizations from the public and the semi-public sector in the Netherlands.
Yeah. And what percentage of your projects are MediaWiki related?
We don't keep track of that, but I would say that over half of the projects that we do have in some way the use of MediaWiki as a part of it, maybe even more.
Yeah. How about the projects you yourself directly work on? Is it similar, about half?
Well, the things that I do, I would say almost 100% of them are involved with MediaWiki, and especially Semantic MediaWiki.
Right, okay. Has the company been doing MediaWiki-related work since the beginning, or did that come about later?
It came about a little bit later after I joined. The company was established in 2008, and about a year and a half later I joined. And actually, I started to experiment with Semantic MediaWiki as a way to organize our own internal knowledge, to establish some sort of knowledge base internally, effectively. And that was the beginning of our involvement with MediaWiki and Semantic MediaWiki. And this took off quite spectacularly because within a month of starting to tinker with it internally, one of our customers saw what we were doing and basically asked us to do the same for them.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's sort of, that's how it came. You weren't planning to use it for consultants, for clients, or you weren't sure at that point?
Initially, it was not meant to be a commercial proposition from our point of view. It was meant to be a way to gather our own knowledge about the different projects that we do and to put them into context and to link them and make them repeatable, shareable. But obviously, that was something that other organizations need as well.
Right, I see. So would you describe that usage of MediaWiki you had internally as architecture related, or it was more just a knowledge management thing that then other people saw and you thought, who made the leap from going from MediaWiki to stored knowledge to using MediaWiki specifically for architecture related storage?
It was architecture. In our case, it was architecture related from the very beginning.
I see. Okay.
And to give you an impression on how we started out using Semantic MediaWiki, it's perhaps good to give a little overview of the field that we're working in. So as I explained, we are mainly engaged with public and semi-public organizations. And one of the things that you see in the Netherlands is that these organizations tend to work from a common baseline that they usually call a reference architecture. And these reference architectures, they're usually sector specific. So you would see one for example, the municipalities in the Netherlands. You would see another one for the provinces, and you would see another one for the education domain. And then there is a sort of an overarching nationwide reference architecture that you could say ties them all together. And this is the field that we're working in, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of interrelated knowledge in all these reference architectures. But the actual trigger to start working with Semantic MediaWiki was even way more down to earth. This nationwide reference architecture at that point in time just consisted of a PDF. It was about 100 pages thick, maybe even more.
Wow.
And there were more than 100 what we call principles in them. Principles are an often used instrument for enterprise and information architecture. They basically give you a framework, a boundary within which you can do further design and implementation. So there were about 100 of these principles, all of them written down in a PDF, and they had all been classified. And I was looking for a subset of these principles that fell into a particular category. And of course, nowhere in the whole document there was a little table that told me these are the principles that you need.
Right.
So that was my
Sure.
immediate problem that I had. One of our customers wanted to know which of these principles are based on a law and I must take into account. And this was codified in the PDF because there was a category that they called de jure principles. So these had a foundation in the law.
Right.
But I had to read and go through 100 or more pages and note down every time I saw this little mark that said this is a de jure principle. And I put it in I think it was in an Excel or something like that. And at the very end, I had a table of about 12 principles hidden in this huge stack of 100 plus other principles.
Right.
My idea was that that could be improved. And the idea behind that is it's as a writer of knowledge to be shared, you never know in advance in which ways this knowledge will be applied. You can think of many applications and then, for example, come up with tables or other cross sections of these knowledge elements that you've written down. But then someone will have another question that you did not think of, and the information is there, you just can't get it out. Well, lo and behold, enter Semantic MediaWiki, which is very, very good in these types of questions to be answered. So that was the very first trigger for me to start tinkering with Semantic MediaWiki in the context of architecture knowledge. And well, what happened then? We just talked about it.
Yeah. Okay. So right. So basically, you're using that internally to give answers to the client about which principles fit which criteria and so forth. And they said, well, can we just have that directly instead of asking you to query it every time, something like that?
Yes. So now we have most of these reference architectures actually use our platform built on Semantic MediaWiki. So if you go to the site of one of these reference architectures within the Netherlands, you will actually see part of our Semantic MediaWiki-based platform that serves you this knowledge. It is a Semantic MediaWiki platform that is now used for these types of knowledge dissemination.
Oh, that's very interesting. How did that come about that they're using that directly now?
Well, that was part of the snowball effect that started once one of our customers saw what we were doing, told it to another customer. And as I said, we are working within the public and semi-public sector. So a lot of these organizations that either maintain these reference architectures or use these reference architectures are part of our customer base. So it was a lot of word of mouth and a lot of evangelism in the very beginning. But we managed to convince several parties, and perhaps they convinced themselves as well, that this type of knowledge dissemination is way better than writing something in a document and hoping that someone will find the document in the drawer once it's needed.
Sure. Yeah. Do you maintain those knowledge bases, or are they maintaining them themselves?
It depends a bit. For some of our customers, we are also involved in the maintenance of the knowledge base. For others, we are working more in the background, helping them to figure out the right types of organization, the right type of what we call knowledge model, what you could also call an ontology. Basically the structure that you use within Semantic MediaWiki to codify and query the knowledge there. And for still others, they do it all by themselves, and they just use our platform as a way to have access to a Semantic MediaWiki product without having to maintain it all by themselves.
Right. Well, this seems like a good time to actually get into what is enterprise architecture, because I assume most people listening, like myself, have only the vaguest understanding of this whole concept. So you've mentioned principles. Is the basic idea with enterprise architecture that you're specifying rules that have to be followed?
So the idea behind enterprise architecture is that basically what you try to do is coordinate what's going on within an organization, but also beyond the boundaries of an organization. And this has to do with information, this has to do with applications and systems, this has to do with business processes, but the big thing is that all of these are connected. And what you do when you start working differently, start to change and adapt your business processes, has an immediate effect on the way that your information is organized, and has an immediate effect on the way that you use the applications or should procure applications. And the other way around, if your application landscape changes, that has an effect on your business processes. And this is true within the boundaries of an organization, but also across the boundaries. So collaborating organizations also experience these types of forces, and trying to get a grip on these forces, trying to make sure that everything works and supports the goals and the mission of the organization. That is what enterprise architecture is about.
Okay, so what's a simple piece of data that could potentially be stored about some organization's architecture? I mean, what's like the atomic level, like the lowest level kind of thing that constitutes enterprise architecture?
Yeah. So what are the knowledge elements that we're talking about, right? So the types of things that we put down in the Semantic MediaWiki. Well, that's information about processes. So a process would be a thing. A system would be a thing, a principle would be a thing, and all the relations in between them. And there are actually languages, modeling languages that express all these things. So they're also a basis for us to configure a wiki so that it can contain enterprise architecture related information.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask about that too, but so what's an example of, say, a principle that could be stored?
An example of a principle. would be ask and register information once and use it multiple times, just to prevent, for example, when you're a government organization or a commercial organization that interacts with customers, that you keep asking for the same information, even though you already have it. And of course, the impact of such a principle would be that within your organization, you would need to have a place where that information can be stored and can be found again. And also that if adaptations and changes to that information come in, that you need to know where you should go to adapt the information that you have about your customers, about your citizens, or whatever the subject of the information is. And these types of principles, they help to have a grip on your information, because if you don't adhere to such a principle, for example, you could end up with different data repositories all over the place, and one of them may say customer X lives at address A, and the other say no, customer X lives at address B. Now, which one is correct? You don't know, because there are multiple data stores. So and there are a lot of these types of guiding statements that we call principles that help you to get a grip on your information and your enterprise.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. It certainly makes sense. It makes sense to store something like that, but it's more high level, I guess, than what I was expecting. I mean, that's not the kind of thing that you can program into the software and to have it enforce that.
No, you would be talking about requirements then.
I see.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And they are, of course, they are all connected. Again, everything is connected.
Right. You'd have some low-level requirement that is, working toward that principle, or that kind of thing.
Yeah. In essence, if starting from a requirement, you keep asking why. Why do we need this requirement? Well, because of X. Why do we need X? Because of Z.
I see.
Then
okay.
eventually, if you're doing things correctly, you end up at the way that the organization is meant to do business.
Right.
So there would be a complete traceable chain from requirements all the way up to principles, all the way up to mission and vision. And then, of course, downwards towards the actual systems that implement these.
I see. So, that's also what I was wondering about, is what is the connection between the statement of these principles and requirements and then the actual software I mean, is the wiki part involved in any of that, in sort of being used in some way to enforce the workflow or whatever it is, to so that the software can more or less guarantee that the requirements are being met? If that made sense.
Yeah, I understand the question. The type of enterprise architecture knowledge that is stored in these wikis, it's not in the form that you would use to programmatically enforce the implications of these principles. But that's also not the goal, because most of the times we're talking about reference architecture. So these are high-level boundaries that then guide organizations to adhere to, for example, certain interoperability requirements at a high level.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. And for a typical organization, how many of these would there be? How many requirements and principles and so forth?
Oh, that can easily run into the hundreds, if not thousands. It depends quite a bit on the scale of the architecture and on the level of detail, because you can go into as much detail as you like, of course.
Right.
But usually principles you wouldn't expect that many, because in order to have them applicable, you need to know them and understand them. So
sure, yeah.
I was talking about this document with more than 100 principles. That's no longer the case. This particular instance has been brought back to some tens of principles.
Okay.
But,
that makes sense.
Especially if you go into the direction of processes or reference processes and systems. Well, you can imagine if you, even at a high level, try to describe a complicated or complex organization, such as, let's say, a municipality or a big bank, and just at the level of what types of systems are running in this organization, you would have a lot, even without specifying each and every instance of them. So what you see is that we're operating at a fairly high level of abstraction, which is the nature of architecture. But obviously there are connections to the more concrete stuff. So things we have been doing are, for example, integrating information that is stored within a CMDB, which is a configuration management database. And this contains an inventory of all the servers within the organization, all the systems, the actual software, and the connection between which software instance is running on which server instance, and is there a test and a production environment, etc., etc. All these details are all in there, and we've been connecting these to the types of application landscapes that are part of the enterprise architecture that would typically be disseminated through this SemanticWiki platform, so that you can have one view that integrates all these little knowledge snippets that are throughout your organization, so that if you look at the application landscape, you can, in a sense, drill down into the details and end up in the CMDB and see what is going on there. If we're talking about the actual servers, the actual software instances, and the actual products that we're using.
Yeah. So for a typical organization, how what's the word? How custom would the architecture be versus just using some predefined architecture package and set of requirements and so forth? So
the architecture within a particular enterprise would almost by definition be particular to that enterprise itself. But there are a lot of commonalities, and these commonalities are expressed in these reference architectures that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Now, there's something else going on, that is how custom-made should the knowledge management environment be. Because if we're talking about enterprise architectures, the way that organization A is doing enterprise architecture, that much different from the way that organization B is doing it. And in the early years, we've been making tailor-made products for every organization that we work with. But nowadays, we're looking more and more into product development. So I talked about these languages that you can use to express enterprise architecture. Over the past 2 years, we have been building a product built upon the Semantic MediaWiki stack that is almost sort of a turnkey solution for organizations that want to disseminate their architecture knowledge that may be recorded in a dedicated modeling environment, but then needs to be disseminated and connected to all the other knowledge bases in the organization. So we're much more working towards application-specific products instead of trying to find a custom-made solution for every question that we have.
Right.
So that's something that's been going on within the way that we use wikis over the past 2 or 3 years, I would say.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. You have two products from what I understand. One is called WikiXL and the other is called ArchiMedes, which I guess is I think is another clever name. It's like the Greek scientist plus architecture. Yep. Were you talking about one of those?
Yeah. So WikiXL is our platform, which is used mainly for tailor-made knowledge bases. So here we go into an organization and try to figure out what is the knowledge model that we need to answer this question. ArchiMedes is a good example of one of these products that are meant to be turnkey, where we already know the context in which the product will be applied, namely architecture modeling, architecture knowledge management. And we know from experience what types of questions are needed there. And because of the way that we structure it within the Semantic MediaWiki, we're flexible enough to add to the standard product any queries that may need to be used to answer any specific questions that would not be part of standard analyses, for example. Another type of product that we're running has to do with information security. So not really architecture at all. But if you look at the way that information security is implemented in organizations, you could say that's mainly a project management type of question that you need to answer there. How far are we, and what are we going to do? What needs to be done? But in our experience, there's also a huge knowledge management aspect to it. There's a lot of things going on that have to do with the implementation of the information security management system that you chose, but this information security management system, which may be a international norm such as the ISO 27000 series, for example, that says if you do information security, this and this and that is what you need to have in place. You will be audited against that if you want to have a certification. Now, this is a standard structure that you see repeated in all of these norms that have something to do with information security, even if they're not the ISO norm. They say there are controls that need to be in place, there are risks that you need to manage, there are processes that may have certain risks, etc., etc. So you see a certain standardized knowledge structure there that again is related to the things that we do in the architecture world, because there we're talking about processes as well. So the way we see it is that there are certain application areas in which you could use a turnkey product, but it needs to be open enough so that you can connect the bits and pieces that are relevant in one domain to the bits and pieces that are relevant in the other domain and that happen to be the same. Processes, for example, or systems that you encounter in different application areas.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So you have ArchiMedes, which is a turnkey solution for enterprise architecture, which comes with, I guess, built-in data structures and so forth. And then you have something similar for security?
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
And what's that one called?
We call it the information security knowledge base.
Okay.
But
it's soft. It's that's a MediaWiki package.
Yeah, it consists of part MediaWiki, but also some dedicated software that uses the MediaWiki as a backend in a sense, so that certain information that is captured within the wiki can be disclosed in a controlled manner to, for example, the public audience that has a right to know, with the GDPR now in place, how organizations in the European Union are managing their privacy, for example.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you have a wrapper around the wiki, if you can call it that, to just publish some of the information. It's sort of a security feature about security.
In a sense,
yeah, that's interesting. That's an idea that's in my work in MediaWiki has come up every once in a while as an easy way to guarantee, read control of the data in the wiki, as opposed to trying to silo off different parts of the wiki. So, sorry.
No.
What were you gonna say?
Go ahead.
So, let's see. Just briefly, we've already gone quite a bit about enterprise architecture. And this might be testing the patience of some of the listeners, but I'm interested also in these languages that you mentioned before. I think you were talking about things like what is it, TOGAF and TOGAF, and there was another one too.
Yeah, so TOGAF is an enterprise architecture framework, but one of these languages that I was talking about is called ArchiMate.
Oh, ArchiMate was the other one. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Can you briefly explain that and how widely it's used?
Yes. So ArchiMate is quite extensively used in the Netherlands, where it has found its origin. But it has been adopted by the Open Group, which is also the organization behind TOGAF. So it has an international user base. And we, in our daily practice, we encounter it pretty much in every organization where we go to. It is the de facto standard for expressing enterprise architecture, at least in the environments that we're working in.
Yeah. So your setup, ArchiMedes, or some of your software, some part of your software can export into ArchiMate. Is that the correct way of thinking about it?
Yes. One of the things that has happened over the past few years is that these architecture repositories have opened up a bit. They used to have their own homegrown export-import routines that we have been using to get model data into the wiki environment. But nowadays there is a standard for ArchiMate model exchange. And our ArchiMedes product is completely based on that standard. So as long as you have a tool that you use to draw the diagrams, for example, that express your enterprise architecture, we can directly import that into the ArchiMedes product, and within the wiki rebuild the views so the diagrams that you generated, because we get the visual information as well, and we have built a visualization component within the wiki that produces SVGs of the diagrams that you constructed in another tool.
Nice.
So I guess that the way that we are using Semantic MediaWiki nowadays is mostly as a way to integrate knowledge from different sources. And that means that the wiki itself is not necessarily the source of all the knowledge that is contained within. We try to make use of ecosystems of tools that the organizations already have, and that have their own strengths. I mean, you don't want to draw a diagram in a wiki. There are other tools for that.
Sure.
But you do want the information from within the diagram, and especially from the model that is expressed in the diagram in the wiki. So that's the approach that we take.
Yeah, and I had there's an extension of mine called External Data that helps with that. Just a little plug. I think you guys are using it actually. Yeah, I mean that it definitely makes sense to use MediaWiki, I think, as the so-called integration hub. So this gets into a thing into your work with XL&Knowledge or XL&Knowledge, just in terms of your growing usage of MediaWiki and Semantic MediaWiki, your expanding set of applications that you can use it for, that you can install it for clients. So what is XL&Knowledge exactly? I mean, it's a consult. I know it's a consulting subsidiary, but what do you within ArchiXL? But what do you do as part of XL&Knowledge?
So one of the strengths of ArchiXL as a consultancy is that it is completely dedicated and completely focused on enterprise and information architecture. But as we were working with MediaWiki in our day-to-day practice, we encountered situations where potential clients or existing clients asked us to apply the types of things we were doing with architecture knowledge, but not to architecture knowledge, but to a slightly different domain.
Right.
And that led us to believe that it would make sense to, at least at the front end, to have a distinction between the things we do in enterprise and information architecture and the things we do in knowledge management. So that led to XL&Knowledge as a knowledge management consulting subsidiary of ArchiXL. And that doesn't mean that everything that we do is either XL&Knowledge or ArchiXL, because a lot of the things we do are still at the boundary of architecture knowledge management. So that has knowledge management aspects and architecture aspects. But some of the things we do are not architecture anymore.
Right.
For example, the things we do in information security, they are of course related to things that you encounter in architecture practice, but they're not architecture per se. And we wanted to have a logical place to also do these types of research and development, these types of engagements. So that led to XL&Knowledge. It's mainly a label that we use to distinguish between the let's say hardcore architecture and the things that cannot be called architecture, but are still, in our opinion, interesting because we like the knowledge management aspect of that.
Yeah. And is that one, XL&Knowledge, is that purely MediaWiki based?
At the current moment it is, but we are also looking into other types of applications. One of the upcoming things is linked data, for example, and we're not sure yet whether, I mean, you can do a lot of linked data stuff with MediaWiki, but perhaps there are certain types of applications that call for other tools than MediaWiki. So we are not a priori bound to using MediaWiki. In practice, we're still, for everything that we do from a knowledge management perspective, MediaWiki and especially Semantic MediaWiki still suffices. But we are very much open to the use of any tool that gets the things done that need to be done.
Yeah, no, sure. And potentially, does it happen when you're working on a project that the client sees the use of MediaWiki for knowledge management and all this other stuff, and then they or you decide to try to just increase its use well beyond anything that could possibly be related to architecture, just something random like an employee directory or a document repository, that kind of thing.
Yes, we encountered that types of applications, and what we usually try is to limit the enthusiasm That may sound strange, but as soon as our customers get an idea of what you can do with MediaWiki and what you can do with a semantic MediaWiki knowledge structure, the next thing is that they want to do everything.
Right.
And so our goal then is to go back a few steps and to say, well, let's start with the most important problem areas you have now. If that is, we don't have an employee directory, we may very well add that to the wiki.
Yeah.
But if there is an employee directory, and if the direct question is much more, let's say, project management related, so we do have all these projects, but we don't know which projects we all have, then we may introduce a project kind of structure within the wiki. And of course, you would have employees working on projects, but these employees are known in the employee directory. So we can make a connection between the two, and for example, get the pictures of the employees from the profiles from their employee directory and show them in the wiki. And again, that's type of an integration. So try to focus on the things that have not been addressed yet, or that have not been addressed sufficiently, and also try to limit the things that you want to register.
Yeah, well, that's a great problem to have, that the client wants you, that you're trying to limit what you're doing for the client, push back as opposed to, as opposed to you wanting to do more and them wanting you to do less. This is very interesting. It sounds like a tangent, but it's not really. Have you heard of a book called Crossing the Chasm?
I don't think I have. No.
Okay, that's fine. This came up a few episodes ago when I was talking to Ben Fletcher. It's a great book about software and business, and one of the author's main suggestions is that you should, when you're trying to market the software, sell one specific aspect of it. Try to make the pitch as short and simple as possible, and then, well, two things. First, spread it as much as you can within a specific small ecosystem so that everyone is using it, and from there work forward and let people discover the other aspects of the software on their own, and have its use spread from that. And this, hearing how you describe it, it sounds like a textbook example of this whole crossing the chasm strategy in practice, whether or not it was intended that way. But the idea is, of course, MediaWiki and semantic MediaWiki and so forth can be used for a lot of things, but you focus the pitch on just specifically storing enterprise and architecture information, and that enabled you, from what I understand, to get a pretty nice percentage or even majority of this group of organizations that do architecture-related management, at least within the Netherlands. I want to get to the geography stuff too, but and then from there, you're then able to upsell, if that's the word, the use of this software for a lot of other kinds of data management. I don't know. I think you should check out that book. I will. Yeah. Okay. I'll send you the link and stuff offline, but and I recommend anyone listening to this check it out as well. we've already talked about it in one episode, but I really think it's got a lot of important lessons. So actually, speaking of the Netherlands, how much work do you do outside of the Netherlands, if at all?
Occasionally. And we have actually been doing a little bit of MediaWiki-related stuff outside of the Netherlands, but most of what we do is confined to the Netherlands. Yeah.
Is that something that you guys want to change, or are you happy, being the de facto, MediaWiki enterprise architecture, MediaWiki in general consultants within the country?
So most of our customers and most of the things that we do are within the Netherlands. But we've been working with international projects a few times as well. And the interesting thing is that we don't seek out these projects, but they find us.
Okay.
And we don't do a lot of international marketing. We have translated our XL&Knowledge website into English, and that's pretty much it.
Well, your main website for ArchiXL is also has an English language version.
Yes, of course.
But I guess that's
yes.
right.
Yeah,
I guess that's.
But the things that we've been doing abroad have been related to the XL&Knowledge label more than to the ArchiXL label.
I see.
But apparently, people find us with the types of questions that they have, and I think this has to do with let's say the niche position that we're in a way, because we are working in this area with things that have to do with knowledge management and architecture. When organizations have particular questions and particular issues at the boundaries of these, then some of them tend to find us. And we've actually been to South Africa because of that.
Oh wow!
And people had read our website and had seen the type of integration that we are supporting between modeling tools and other parts of organizational repositories, and that fitted the problem that they were experiencing at that point in time. So they called us.
Right. Yeah, that would be a long distance call, I guess.
About as long distance as this one, I guess. Yaron.
Sure, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's really neat. So we haven't really talked about the software that you guys have developed. Well, we have talked about it a little bit, but as part of WikiXL, I guess, is the name of your. Can I call it rebranding of MediaWiki? It's MediaWiki plus extension plus a package of extensions, some of which are yours. Is that a correct way of describing WikiXL?
Yeah, we position it as a platform that consists of the semantic MediaWiki stuff and the stuff that we've put upon it. Yeah.
Yeah. Does it also come with predefined data structures like templates and forms and that kind of thing, or is that a separate thing? Well,
then you get into this realm of the products that we've been talking about.
Okay, I get it. Okay, so WikiXL is a collection of software which includes MediaWiki and open source and custom extensions. From what I understand, some of those extensions that you personally helped develop, what kinds of extensions have you created?
There are a few of them that together give an ecosystem of tools and plugins that work in the environment that we are working in. One of them has to do with structuring the knowledge elements that you want to record in the wiki. So this is, in a sense, this is a little ontology builder that we have integrated in the wiki, so that you can click and arrive at the structure of the data that you want to store in the wiki. Another one that we use a lot in these integration environments is a kind of a pipeline that we connect on one end to the tool that contains the knowledge that we want to import in the wiki, and on the other end we connect it to the wiki, and within this pipeline there are a couple of transformations so that the information that comes in is prepared and made ready to be injected into the wiki and to be part of that knowledge structure that we built with the little ontology builder. So this these are two examples of extensions that we built upon the stuff that's already available from the open source community.
Yeah. Do you ever touch the code of extensions like Semantic MediaWiki or Page Forms or even Core MediaWiki, or is all your work related to just these self-contained custom extensions?
Well, once in a while we touch the code of other extensions. This usually has to do with bugs, for example, that we encounter, or situations that were not expected and that we can reproduce in our environment. And that may lead to patches that we then contribute again upstream to the open source community. And we've even published one or two extensions that we developed in-house, but that we found to be so generic that it would not make sense to just have them for ourselves, but we released them in the open. Nowadays, these extensions have been obsoleted. One of them was the SemanticDummyEditor, as we called it. And what this thing did was, if you had dependencies between different pages, then the dependent pages would be updated if one of the pages that it depends on was changed. And nowadays, that's a construction that's been built into the core of Semantic MediaWiki. I guess it's in a different way than we did it, but that pretty much solves the functional need that we had there. So that extension is now no longer used.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all my questions. Thanks a lot, Remco. This has been a very interesting discussion.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be part of your podcast series. Thanks again.
Oh, great. That's great to hear. This has been another episode of Between the Brackets. I want to again thank my guest, Remco de Boer of ArchiXL. See you next time.